Hello, everyone, and welcome to LeeLa. I'm Lee Philbrook. The mission of the LeeLa community is to transform conversations and practices into actions that make a difference. And LeeLa actually comes from Sanskrit, and it means divine or creative play, or literally your story. And we love to explore others' stories. It's going to be an awesome show this evening. We're going to start off with a short background on us, your hosts, followed by an opening intention. And then we have our special guest, Noemi Weiss, award-winning documentary filmmaker. And to me, Noemi really is an example of someone who is living her purpose and truly is an inspiration. Tonight, we will be exploring her body of work through conversations and discussions about her films. We'll then open the floor to questions and an opportunity for us to really connect the dots around mental health and the interesting rhythm of Noemi's work. So please feel free to comment throughout in the chat box, and we'll ask you to put up your virtual hand and call your name, and we can unmute you later on in the evening. Really, it is our intention to uncover the learnings from Noemi's films. We as a group can discover ideas to create change in our communities. And then we'll do closing intentions and announcements. So here we go. Over to my co-host, Lisa English. Lisa?
Welcome to LeeLa, everyone. This is a safe space where you can all explore, learn, and have fun. It's also a place where we hope to inspire you all to live a congruent and intentional life. A little bit about me. I'm a high school teacher, an entrepreneur, and a content creator for small businesses. And this conversation tonight with Noemi is so important to me because number one, I'm really inspired by her films and her work. And then being a high school teacher, it's really, really important for me to be such a strong role model for youth and to really provide them with an environment that's, where they can be heard, it's safe, so that they can ultimately grow into their best selves. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it back over to my co-host, Lee Philbrook. Lee?
I'm really passionate about creating meaningful connections, and I'm a heart-centered difference maker. I believe that everything we need is within us, and sometimes we get stuck in life. I'm a mindset coach, and I've developed a unique way of creating deep core changes using neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and Reiki. So now what we'd like to do is do our opening intention, and this really connects us and holds the space for the evening. So please close your eyes. May divine grace surround us, uphold us, and cherish us all. May it support us and our sacred trust and community. May we be strong together and our journeys be brighter and higher for having walked side by side. May we be guides for others and ourselves with clarity, tenderness, and light, feeling gentle in our minds and clear with our words, sending peace in all directions of time. With gratitude, we take this moment to arrive and join together. Open your eyes. Welcome to the room. And now over to Lisa to introduce our special guest. Lisa?
Noemi Weiss is an award-winning writer, director, and producer that has spent over 20 years telling stories on the big and small screens, from her worldwide advertising projects to her award-winning documentaries. As a humanitarian and an advocate leader, Noemi journeys where stories take her to bring voice to the world's most vulnerable. Her films have been sold in more than 50 countries, receiving numerous awards, but most importantly, making a difference in communities around the world. She received a message of support from Sophie Trudeau for her film Milk and was honored with an invitation to meet Pope Francis at the Vatican in recognition of her impact of the films that she's created in global communities. Additionally, Noemi has been recognized as one of the most top 10 influential Hispanic Canadians, an award given by Toronto Mayor John Tory. Noemi is a proud member of UNESCO, Team Canada's trade missions, and a business ambassador of Ontario, promoting the merits of Canadian production abroad. In this capacity, she participates in trade missions and has been honored with the nomination of Women Entrepreneur of the Year for 3 years in a row, the last one by Export Development Canada, and nominated as a finalist for Women Entrepreneur of the World as the sole Canadian nominee. It is now my pleasure to welcome our special guest of the evening, Noemi Weiss. Welcome, Noemi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here with both of you, Lisa and Lee, and a wonderful group of people, a lot of familiar faces and friends and loved ones that I haven't seen in a while. So I'm very, very honored to be here, and thank you for holding the space with such a beautiful introduction, Lee. That was very beautiful, and to you as well, Lisa. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. It's great to have you, Noemi, and glad you have lots of support from everyone here tonight. So we're going to get it started off with a couple of just introductory questions. So the first one I have here for you, Noemi, is how did you get into documentary films in the first place? And, you know, it's such a difficult business. So from chatting with you, it really seems like this is your life purpose and it's your calling.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I come from the advertising world, from having an ad agency. So I changed from one end of the spectrum of telling stories on the commercial end to go to the spiritual. But I formed Film Blank back in '98 with a very philanthropic approach. My idea, there was no emails and there was no internet and globalization did not exist, but I had a vision. I just wanted to put people together. And I wanted to create a way of bringing people, creative people, in a way to create and to forget about the options and the obstacles of not being able to promote or create what they wanted because of a budget constraint. So my idea was, if we unite the world together and we are able to offer somehow the possibilities of production, and I started with commercials, then we will be able to fulfill everybody's dreams. So I traveled for the first 2 years trying to explain people what I was trying to do that nobody really understood at that time. And it took me a couple of years, but I made, you know, associations with more than 30 countries, and then very successfully moved into doing commercials where people were coming from different parts of the world, and we were able to really put things together. But my intentions were always my interest was always on human rights, and I started doing documentaries, and my first documentary, Gloriously Free, and I realized that with the budget that I had in one of the multinational commercials, I could do a documentary and change people's lives, and I was making an impact. And it became more and more difficult to be in the circus, as I called it, because we had such big budgets and so much, you know, those commercials internationally are very big productions. And slowly I started moving into documentaries, and they sucked me right in, and I just could not go anywhere else. And it was the journey that I've been living for the last 20 years, with a lot. It's the richness of the spirit that brings me to keep on going.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it really, really shows in your work too. It comes out so amazing. And your films have such a fascinating range of topics you've explored. And like you said, like an interesting rhythm over the years as well. So tonight, like Lee mentioned, we're going to have a little conversation on your first 7 films to start, and then we'll get into a longer conversation on Connecting the Dots, your most recent film. So, and just a reminder for everyone, feel free to comment. I know some of you have already commented in the chat box, but we'll have a formal, you know, questions at the end as we finish connecting the dots. So here we go, Noemi. We're going to start with your first film, Gloriously Free, like you mentioned. Feels like forever ago in 2004. So can you tell everyone what it's about?
Yeah, so Gloriously Free. Well, the name comes from the Canadian national anthem, Glorious and Free. And it's a call to freedom, really. It shows um, people that had to flee from their own countries because of sexual orientation. And they had to leave because some of them were persecuted, some of them were threatened with death in some countries where honor killing would not penalize someone actually killing someone because that person was gay. So I felt that there was a story that I needed to tell, and Gloriously Free shows how these people, five participants in the film, have been able to develop themselves as individuals independently of their sexual orientation once they came to Canada, and how Canada embraced them. And back in 2004, it was not talked about it that much. And incredible with that film is that it still keeps on running. And make when you make one of these films, I think part of my inspiration is thinking that I'm going to change the world right away, and that's what it's like we're going to do it, and this is never going to happen again. And surprisingly enough, Gloriously Free continues, and even last month there was a screening about it because the topic of LGBT and sexual orientation is probably more relevant now. At least people are talking about it, but a lot has happened. But there are some countries around the world that are still going through that problem. So Gloriously Free was a really big inspiration in the sense that I could make a difference in people's lives, even in the journey of making the film. We won a number of awards with it, and then I thought, why not? This is wonderful. This is something that we could continue bringing stories and using the medium to be able to help people in the process.
You said that, a lot has changed since then and it's still relevant today. So what changes have you seen in the LGBTQ community since that release in 2004?
Well, people are able to talk about it. A lot of people are feeling freer about the fact that, having a sexual difference doesn't make you a better or a worse person. You are a person to begin with, and you should be respected as such. Gloriously Free is the only film that the rest of my films focus mostly on women and children. So I feel that Gloriously Free is the freedom that brought me into doing documentaries. The name and the title and all of it goes together.
Amazing. So yeah, we're going to move on to your second film now. So let's talk about it. That was made 2 years later in 2006. So can you give everyone a little bit of a recap on what that was about?
So Let's Talk About It is a film about domestic violence, which again is very relevant today, and actually one of my films that did the best in viewership last year during the pandemic, which is quite incredible to think that films of this nature never die. Let's Talk About It. It's the first time that there's intimate conversations between children of homes that suffer from domestic violence and their parents. So it's a very unique take where we can listen to the children. And the beauty of that film, I think, is having given voice to those young people. Because when I was doing research for that film, I got a lot of calls from young teenage girls, mostly girls, who tell me, I know that you're doing this film. I would like to talk. My mother will not be able to. She will not come on camera, but I have a story to tell. So that film I wrote and I produced, but Deepa Mehta directed. And when I met with Deepa, I told her that I really wanted to bring the young people into the film. And she came up with a creative idea of creating a workshop and giving the young people the camera and teaching them how to use the camera and giving them 24 hours to go and talk to the parents. And the interesting thing was that most parents, when we approached them and we told them this is what we want to do, they said, my kids don't know what I'm going through because I was really hiding everything, and they were not part of it all. So they had a huge surprise. Those kids knew a lot more than the parents ever knew. They had very intimate conversations, and the result was incredible, and it's part of the film. And Let's Talk About It is a film that also won awards, but more than anything, it brought in a lot of conversation in the educational world. It continues to be distributed in schools and viewed in universities, and as a case study of how children of abused homes go through this, knowing a lot more than the parents know, and how important it is to let's talk about it. That's what the name comes from.
So yeah, that must have been one of the things you've uncovered about domestic violence by doing this film, is that, you know, kids know more. Was there anything else that you uncovered from doing this film about domestic violence?
Well, there was a lot of healing in the process of making that film, which was very beautiful. There was one mother who did not speak to her daughter, or I should say the opposite. Her daughter did not speak to her mother for a while, because she was very angry with that mother, because she was being abused. And that daughter was strong, and that daughter wanted the mother to hold on to her strength and act. And because of the film, I was able to bring them together, and they had a beautiful journey together. And I think that was an eye-opener for me, because I did not see that, I did not experience that, and that was making a difference in the making of the film, which was very enriching for me, you know, and also very inspiring for everyone involved in the film.
What a beautiful thing to come out of that. Amazing. And your next film, The Forgotten Woman, also a focus on women as well. So this was such a visually provocative film, really. And can you paint a picture for everyone about, again, what it's about and just a little bit of background about it?
Yeah, The Forgotten Woman was a co-production with Hamilton Meta. And when I was doing Let's Talk About It with LeeLa, she was doing water. And then I went on to do the impact campaign of bringing the film into the world while she was doing water. And the audience was asking her what's happening today. And in most of the Q&As that she was doing, which water was a beautiful film, but it was a script that she wrote, people wanted to know what was happening today. So she approached me and she said, I think that we need to do a documentary. There's an audience that wants to know, and I think you should do it. And I knew nothing about the widows in India, but I researched for a whole year. I did a very thorough research. I became to know everything about them, and I became to understand the severity of the problem. So it was a film that took 3 years to make, and a lot of trips to India, back and forth, and it did very well in bringing awareness of an issue that people thought that it was in the past. There's 40 million widows in India that become ostracized from society the moment that their husbands died, just for that mere reason. So 40 million is the population of Canada. So if we think about the numbers, is quite something. The Forgotten Woman is part of the elite series of the Academy, the Oscars, and it continues, from what I heard recently, to be researched in the Academy as part of an important topic. So
amazing. And you follow the life of the two really important change makers in this film. So Dr. Ginny Srivastava and Dr. Mohini Giri. So how have they transformed the lives of those thousands of widowed women in India?
Well, Ginny Srivastava is a Canadian, actually.
Yes, amazing.
It's a Canadian that got married to a man from India, met him in university, and then went to India. And then she wanted to make a difference. And she was always a big political person with a wonderful, strong, and she founded an organization called Strong Women Alone. And when I contacted her, she was very, very pleased to be part of the film and tell her story, and the women that she had really helped come out of the darkness, and brought them into a very to a position that not only were they able to speak their mind and be themselves, but she gave them the possibility of becoming part of society again, which was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And
very,
what did
very inspiring. And Mohini Giri, we were fortunate enough to bring her to Toronto, and when we were doing the film, and she was part of one of the screenings. So a very nice memory coming back.
she had a shelter as well? Is that correct, in India, where she's sheltering some of these women?
Yes, in Udaipur. Yeah.
Amazing. And Noemi, what did you learn, or what was your why for this film?
Well, the why really was why I got into was the story came to me more than anything. But I think that I grew up in that film. I kept on asking myself, what was I doing in India, in a place that I didn't know before? Talking to women in complete destitute, being in ashrams, also being in places where were very, very remote, where I could not really be myself because, being blonde and white, I stood out
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and it was difficult. So it really gave me a lot of perspective. But the widows, I think, that taught me a very big lesson, which was understanding the level of sufficiency. What is sufficient in life? These women had absolutely nothing. There were women that I saw it with my own eyes. We filmed it. They were living on a cup of rice a day, and they were still smiling. So coming back really was an eye opener for me. There was a transformation that I felt that grew. What is the level of sufficiency? How much do we need to be happy? And what is it that makes us happy? So that was a big lesson for me.
Really big lesson. Amazing. Thank you so much, Noemi. I'm going to pass it over to Lee now to continue with the rest of your film. So over to you, Lee.
Teaching the life of music, Noemi. I absolutely loved this film. I found it incredibly inspiring and uplifting, and it actually brought me to tears. Can you tell us about this film?
It's funny that you say that it brought you to tears, because it's my happy film.
Well, exactly, but happy tears, like absolute joy.
Everybody tells me that they cried with the film, and I'm saying, but it's my happy film.
I know.
Well, it was a really beautiful inspiration to do this film, because it was created by the program of El Sistema in Venezuela was created by a man called Jose Antonio Abreu. And when he formed this, he formed it with the premise that if he was going to be able to give an instrument to a child, that child will never hold a gun. And that for me was very powerful, and was something that I thought, this is how we stop violence. This is how we actually bring a child into a different environment. So it's not about it. What the most inspirational thing about it is that it's not about creating more musicians. The film is it's a social movement. It's about bringing kids off the street through music, and giving them a community and a safe space, and then they learn to communicate. I mean, being in an orchestra, the communications, knowing between, listening to one another, making sure that they can work together as a community. So it was very inspiring, and following that story, and following the program that was created in Ottawa as an inspiration from El Sistema. That's how the film came to life, and brought me a lot of satisfactions. Was one of those films that I really, really had a lot of fun doing it. It was inspirational. It brought me smiles, and it was very important for me to do that, because it was at the same time that I was doing Desert Riders. which was
heavy. Yeah, we'll talk about next. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about El Sistema and how it's made a global impact?
Yes, it did make a global impact. For 30 years, nobody knew about El Sistema in Venezuela. And then there was a program on television in the United States that brought it to the world. And Canada took that as an example, and they started with a program in Ottawa. And then other countries started, and now it's spread all over the world. I'm very pleased to say that the film Teaching the Life of Music was the inspiration to 3 centers of people that watched the film. I mean, I will be very brief, but one morning I woke up and I had an email from this man who said that he had not slept the whole night. He had come from work on a Sunday night, turned on the television, and there was Teaching the Life of Music. And he said, this is my calling. This is something that I've been looking for, and I didn't know what it was. So he stayed up the whole night. This is an older man looking for me, and he found me. So he wrote me this email and he said, I want to talk to you. So I could not believe it, from tiny Ontario, that I didn't even know tiny existed. So I connected with him, of course, and I helped him out. I connected him with all the right people that he needed to talk. And then a year later, he connected with me to tell me that he had gotten funding from his community and that he was starting. And I said, how can I help now? And he said, we need instruments. So at that time I was doing milk. I was in the research of milk, and I had a group of students and a dear friend that was helping me here. And we just made a campaign and reached out for instruments. And my living room was full of instruments until someone called that they wanted to bring a piano. And I said, that's the end. I can't hold anymore. So I received him. He drove 2 hours to be with me and to pick up all the instruments. And we cried, the 2 of us, because he was so emotional. And he was saying, every instrument, we're going to change the life of so many children. So, and then that was just a beautiful outcome of that film. And it continues to play on TV. So.
And that's why it brought me to tears, the joy, like purely the joy of that film. Absolutely. Well, and I am going to move. Unfortunately, we need to keep moving on. But Desert Riders, as you touched on before, we understand that this was a difficult topic to explore and a challenging film for you to make, both from a logistical perspective and a safety perspective. Can you tell us what Desert Riders was about?
Desert Riders tells the story of children that have been either sold or trafficked from countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, into the Arab countries to work as camel jockeys. Very little boys, all boys. And those kids were really starved all through the process of being there, because the lighter the jockey, the faster the camel. So that was an incredible, difficult film to make. And more than anything was how difficult the production was and to get access. So was emotionally very hard. And that's why working on Desert Riders and working on Teaching the Life of Music simultaneously was very important for me, because it was the yin and yang that kept me going.
I can imagine.
But it was a very difficult film to make. And Desert Riders, not only on the logistics of it, I wrote it and produced it, but I could not direct that film. I needed a director that had the wisdom and also the experience to be able to travel to these destinations, and also have the maturity to be able to be in situations that were so difficult. So I worked with Vic Sarin, who's a phenomenal cinematographer and a very, very seasoned director. And we traveled with a very small crew, sometimes the 2 of us, sometimes with my son Eugene, that was helping with sound, he was helping with camera, he was helping with whatever we could. And we we went to places like the three of us went to Mauritania for 10 days and we could not film. We went on the premise that we had the permits, and once we got there, we couldn't film. So I risked my life in Mauritania now thinking back, because I was going to these places where there were no women. There absolutely were no women. In the UAE, when I was able to get the entrance to the Ministry of Defense, but there were absolutely no women at all, and let alone a white woman, and let alone a woman from the Western world. So definitely has been a very difficult film to produce, but then it gave us a lot of satisfaction, because it went around and it sold in very many countries, was in an enormous amount of festivals, won very many awards, and in that sense, people were very curious of a topic that nobody knew about.
Absolutely. And you know, it really does kind of expose a dark topic. But you always leave the audience with a sense of hope, right? What actions and impacts have taken place to stop the practice of child trafficking since filming? And yeah, can you tell us about that?
Well, the reason that we went to the UAE is because there was a documentary that was a very short documentary that actually was done by HBO on really talking only about the sports, but they exposed the fact that these kids were being trafficked, and because of that, it went into the higher powers, and the US was working with the UAE very closely, and they put a lot of pressure, and the UAE gave back 4,000 kids and paid $1,000 to each. But there were 40, according to UNICEF, there were 40,000 kids that were missing. So wow. Apparently right now it's stopped. They're robots. We show them in the film. They have moved from having young boys to have robots, and the situation has been in the past, but this was going on for 20 years, and needed to be stopped. So the media really worked. This is the power of media.
That's amazing. Thank you. Abuelas. I'm going to move forward to talk about abuelas. And this means, for those of you that don't know, grandmother in Spanish. This is such a beautiful film, Noemi, on another challenging topic featuring absolutely courageous grandmothers. Can you tell us about this film?
Yeah, well, you know, I am originally from Argentina. So for me to tell the stories of the grandmothers was very important. And for me was not to make a political film. On the contrary, I think that the most important thing for me was to inspire women around the world, and mostly young women, on what women can do when they are together. And the whole film is actually that. So when you watch the film, it really tells you what these women that were ordinary women, that yes, they got together because of a terrible thing that happened to them. Their kids disappeared, and they were looking for their grandchildren, and they continue. But because of the adversity, they became creative. And they became creative to a point that they really form an organization that up until today is world renowned. And they were so creative to find that through DNA of the grandparents, they could actually, find the grandchildren. But they were not prepared for this. The one that cooked was the one that knew how to cook, was the one that was cooking for them. The one that knew how to write a letter was the one that would write a letter. And that's how it went on and on. And for me, that was the inspiration, and that's what the film is all about. So the story behind it is really the tool. So that film, I showed it, I mean, it did very well in the United States, in very many universities. And here in Canada was shown by CBC and the documentary channel. But I presented it myself in a number of universities in the US, where they brought me in to show it in women's studies. And it was very interesting for me to be with young students and tell them the reasons why I thought that film was important. The story behind it, yes, they can read it on the internet and they can know about it, but what women have been able to do by the mere fact that they got together with a mission, that was unparalleled for me. And that's the big message of the film. And that film was supposed to be a feature. I really went again with Eugene, with my son, to do research, and the two of us went just to see if we could bring something. And then when we created a half an hour, and I went to Argentina and met with all of the grandmothers and showed it to them and said, this is what we have, but I planning to do a feature. And they said, no, we don't want you to do a feature. You've done it in half an hour. You told our story in a way that nobody has ever told it, because I did not delve so much on the backstory, but mostly on bringing them to the forefront as women of inspiration to the world.
I was so touched by that film, and yes, in that half hour, you got this sense that little by little they created something massive. It was amazing. I'm going to move forward because you actually answered all of my questions so eloquently there. The next film, inspirational, informative, provocative, sensitive. Milk really celebrates a new life into this world with a strong call to action and reflection. What is the film Milk about?
Milk is about bringing a new life into this world. It talks about the commercialization of birth and infant feeding from a global perspective. Because when I started doing research, and talking to moms and from around the world, it was very, very clear that it didn't matter where they were from or what socioeconomic background they had. A mother is a mother, and they wanted the best for their child. There continues to be a very big problem, which was very curious for me to find out the reasons why for decades, there's been such a fight with the marketing of formula companies. And that continues to today. So that needed to be brought to the attention of the public. And then we cannot talk about infant feeding without talking about birth. And that's why I delve into the commercialization of birth, because there is a huge business behind the cesareans that women go to. So that needed to be exposed as well. But one of the things that the film brought unique, and it's the first time that it's being shown in a film, is breastfeeding in emergencies. We filmed in the Philippines, showing the aftermath of the typhoon Haiyan, and what happened in an emergency when the government was really pushing for the formula companies, because they had an agreement with them between the government and the companies. But the women really needed to breastfeed, because if they were not breastfeeding, those babies would die, because under a typhoon, they had lost absolutely everything. So they had no means to have a formula with clean water, and babies were dying. And so I thought, this is something that really, really needs to come to the forefront. So has never been on the media before. It actually inspired a group from Alberta, and they created a group and an organization about breastfeeding in infant feeding, I should call it, infant feeding in emergencies, to take care of the problem in Fort McMurray when there was a fire in Alberta a few years ago. And that was amazing for me, that these women actually got inspired by the film and were able to do this and save so many people after the fire and come on their emergency. So nobody really talks about what happens in an emergency, and people always think in emergencies you have to give whatever you need to give, and nobody will ever think, of course they are sending milk to the babies, but those babies were dying. So there's a lot of, usually when doing human rights films or any story related to human rights, there's a lot of business behind it. And unfortunately, we have to deal with that.
Can you tell me the Milk educational program? How has that had an impact on the communities all around the world?
Yeah, I created an educational program based on the fact that talking to some people in Africa where I had filmed, in Kenya, they mentioned to me that if you invite people for a workshop, they will never come. But if you invite them to watch a film, the whole community will come. They don't never have the opportunity. So I thought, well, if we create an educational program and use the film as a tool, that will be the beginning of something. So it was a very, for over 2 years, we did an enormous amount of community screenings, followed by workshops or panel discussions or professional development. And there's been an enormous amount of implementation of changes here in Canada. We went across the nation from coast to coast. The Telos Fund was able to support us. And we went here mostly to indigenous communities. Because that's where it was needed the most, and I felt that that's where I needed to go. So we did about 82 screenings with the indigenous communities that, unfortunately, when they saw the film, they felt very identified with the third world country stories in the film. So that shows that we still have a lot of work to do, but a lot of implementation came as a result. Probably we reached over 100 countries with milk, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to screen it at the Vatican and at the United Nations. That the United Nations was used to actually pass on a legislation. So that was powerful. That was wonderful. I felt like I had conquered the world with all those flags around me. And that's what the intentions are. So, screening at the Vatican and in this strong, powerful change makers that could actually bring the changes to the community, that was very important. In Paraguay, I screened it at the Senate with all the ministers of the, from women's issues to child rights and so on and so forth, and there's implementation of changes as a result. So that's what these films are made for.
You blow me away, Noemi. So powerful. So we're now going to actually show your most current film. Lisa's going to show the trailer, and then we're going to talk about connecting the dots.
Okay, thank you.
Do people know what mental health is? Do people know what mental illness is?
Every single one of you in here that's battling, every one of you that feels like you're alone, every one of you who feels like nobody understands you. How many of you relate to what I'm talking about? Raise your hand.
There should be some kind of a system that talks about mental health problems in schools, like in lessons, just anywhere really.
They're having to deal with a lot of very, very ill people rather than it being more about prevention.
Youth mental health, it's the same story everywhere I go.
I want to get to the root of it and to really figure out the why from the mouth and the stories of young people.
I can sometimes feel a panic attack. Like I woke up this morning and I knew for a fact I was going to have a panic attack.
I'm taking this because I think if I look at my face, it'll calm me down.
I don't even see myself alive after high school.
People need to hear the truth that most kids our age are not fine.
I never saw myself represented anywhere. I felt like it was very invisible. Not only being a woman, but a Black Muslim woman, I just thought that those problems were for everybody except people like me.
I don't want other young people to feel the way I did growing up. Finally, I have a chance to fight the system. I think we just start hearing from young people like myself when making policies related to somebody's mental health.
There are so many things inherent to a space when you build it up properly that help people become more resilient and help people find community. When you make sure a space is safe, where you make sure that everybody feels welcome into a space, people feel like they can be themselves.
I'm telling my story. It's literally making something painful inside beautiful.
So sick of being unhappy because I'm so young, and I feel like I need to be able to experience the world in a positive, healthy way.
I just wanted to be accepted for who I am, and I just wanted to be loved.
It took me 5 years to finally open up about my mental illness, but it wasn't as scary as I thought. It was one of the best things I've ever done.
Young people have to know that even though at times they may feel that they're in the darkness, if they could just know just to hold on, that light is going to come over the horizon.
The minute we start talking about mental illness, then people will not be ashamed.
I just really hope the world could change.
Connecting the dots. Can you tell us about this film and really why you chose to have it told from the perspective of the youth?
Well, that was a decision when I first started with the film. When I heard about the kids, I thought it was very important. But then as I moved forward, I did bring in some adults and some professionals, and a documentary, you write it 3 times. You write it the first time when you have your vision, you continue writing it when you're on set and filming, and then you come to the editing room. So that was a big decision that was part of a creative team decision between myself and Eugene and Andre, which was the story editor, of not bringing the adults in. Which was my first thought. That's why I only filmed three adults that are not in the film at the end, because this is their platform. Talking to them, I always told them, this is not my story, this is your story. That I'm going to be the storyteller, and I'm going to do the best I can to be able to bring your story to life and to give you a voice that will hopefully bring the changes that are needed in our society now more than ever with COVID.
Yeah, your timing, like I imagine you never thought that at this moment in time that you would be actually, premiering the film in the middle of a pandemic.
Not in my wildest dreams. When I started with the film 3.5 years ago, I had a lot of challenges from everyone I spoke to, because they did not really believe that there was an issue. If they were not reading the statistics that I was reading, if they were not talking with the professionals that I was talking, the general public really thought that this was teenage angst, that this was a problem of adolescents, that why are they complaining? But I had the pulse of what was happening. And now bringing the film under a pandemic where now it's all over the news, it's the good of adversity for me, because in the hopes that we will bring change, as always, that's my mission, is the fact that society at large will be able to identify with young people and understand their loneliness, understand their anxiety, understand their depression. So it's been quite a journey, and probably one of the most difficult films for me, in terms of emotional journey and production as well.
So in the trailer that we just watched, we hear the voice of Nathan, the main protagonist in the film, who talks about getting to the root of the problem. What do you think is at the root for most young people today?
Well, I think going to the root is going back to basics. The society has been in a very unbalanced way for many years. And when you are out of balance, you get dizzy. When you get dizzy, you don't feel good.
Nope.
So society at large has been in a very unstable unbalance, and we have gone into this frenzy, and I don't know if that's a word in English, but it's that
frenetic.
yes. So the thesis all along while I was making the film was, what have we created as a society to have a generation of kids feeling this way? And answering to that really is what we have created. And what do we need? And the roots is, yes, to listen to the kids, to go back to the basics, to look at family union, to look at conversations, to open the conversation, and to take some time to reflect on the life that is around us, because we have been very busy being busy for too long.
I can appreciate that. Your film, Connecting the Dots, accomplished something that many parents wish they could do. You managed to get 300 youth from around the world to trust you and to open up to the state of their mental health. How did you gain their trust?
Well, when you create a safe space, I think people feel comfortable in talking. They knew I was very honest with them from the very beginning. I told them what I was doing and why was I doing and what was my mission, and also that their participation was going to actually be a symbol of hundreds of thousands of other kids that are feeling like that, and that in that process they could help other kids. So they were empowered by that. But having intimate conversations with anyone really is that when you're able to understand what without judgment, and when you're able to listen to them, and when you're able to sometimes give them advice that they always need, or another voice or another suggestion, it was welcome, because these kids were really in a very dark situation, and they opened to the Visual Diaries, that I coined that name, but I called it, was a way that brought us together in very many instances, and some of them send very many Visual Diaries on a regular basis that I questioned to some of them, and they told me inadvertently, you have created a tool for me. I know that someone is listening. So that was very beautiful for me to know that that was real, that was happening. And what was I offering them was really to tell their story, or to share a moment, either vulnerable or a call to action, and talk to them on a very regular basis. It was a huge undertaking. It was a very big undertaking to be on a constant basis talking to these kids, who would send videos that I was responsible of watching and responding back, and guide them back into what's next. Some of them needed guidance into what's next to talk, and depending on where they were in their lives. And some others felt very free to be able to send whatever it was needed. So for me, that was very important, to make it as a juxtaposition between the reality of the voices of reason that they represent. For me, they bring the voice of reason to the whole situation of youth mental health, and juxtapose this with the beauty of the world around us. Because if you notice in the film, there's very little that was filmed inside. I filmed everything outdoors, because I felt that people needed to see the world around them, that so many times is forgotten, and so many times is in front of a computer. So it was a problem with sound in many cases, that they were complaining, why did you choose to shoot in such a location? But it was very important to bring the outdoors for me, the beauty of this world, and bring hope as well. The film, in spite of the fact that it is about mental health, leaves the audience with a strong sense of hope, which was what I wanted from the very beginning.
And can you just touch on, because you talked about your why and your mission. So what was that when you started out?
I did not want to get into this film, honestly, because it was a very difficult topic, and I had told myself, and my dear friends around me told me not to get into such a difficult topic. But I did, because of a couple of reasons. I was invited to be part of this film, by one of the executive producers in the film, who convinced me to go to this World Convention in Ireland. And I was invited to meet with the Pope right before that. And for some very strange reason, when I spoke to the Pope, he told me not to forget about the youth, which he did not know where I was going and what was I doing. And I thought, wow. But I didn't take that at heart, and I didn't make this film because of that. But it was an indication that I was in for something. But once I went to this big convention in Ireland, I was able to meet with hundreds of people and young people and professionals, and I realized that there was a real problem. And if I had the medium, I could support the young people, and there was something that I needed to do. So I delved in, and then I could not get out of it, because the more I delved in, the more committed I became, and the responsibility towards the participants, the kids, and what I had promised them that we were going to do with the film was something that kept me going all the way through. And the commitment to the funders as well, who expected a lot from me and felt that I could do it. Of course I can do it. But it was a very difficult journey. But the results are here. Was not easy to edit and do the whole process of post-production under COVID, but we were fortunate enough to film before the pandemic started. So that, and then we launched with a global virtual screening back in November.
And tell us now, I know you have two versions of the film. You've got one North American and an international version. I wanted to just touch on the international version, where you featured a story about the friendship benches and the grandmothers in Zimbabwe. How did this happen in Zimbabwe, and how did you get, I can't read my typing here, and how did you get modeling the pier benches in New York City?
I did not get them to model. I follow the story.
Right. Please forgive me, but yes, the grandmother benches in Zimbabwe, and then they modeled that in New York with pier.
That's right. Well, you know, when you talk about mental health, it's very difficult to talk about solutions, because there's not really solutions that you can bring, but you can bring prevention, and you can bring preventative solutions, if you want to call it that, like that. I was looking, when I was doing research, for potential preventative solutions that could be could inspire other places in the world to replicate. And when I came across the Friendship Bench, I thought, this is it, because everyone you talk to, when you talk about the problems of the system and the lack of, it's always about the lack of funding. And here is an example of someone who created a bench for people to sit and talk. And it doesn't have to be a bench. You could sit in a corner and talk. You can sit anywhere you want to talk. They started with the grandmothers, which I love grandmothers to begin with. So I thought there's something about this that is very special. And when I started delving into the story, and I was communicating with Dr. Chibanda, who created this, out of a crisis in the country of Zimbabwe, when he was only just one of 15 psychiatrists in the country, he needed to do something. And he thought, I'm going to give the grandmothers a job. And he trained them. The interesting thing is that when the numbers and the needs of young people with such high rates of depression and anxiety and suicide raised up, he realized, and they all realized, they became a group, the Friendship Bench, that the kids didn't want to sit with the grandmothers. So they started training young people. And now that's how the peer-to-peer happened in Zimbabwe. But the interesting thing about the replication of the program in New York is that here they are, in the United States, they are taking an innovation from Africa to bring it into the United States. And I think that's remarkable. And that's something that we should all look at. And it comes back to the abuelas, if we want to bring them all together in a way. You know, what happens under adversity, and what happens when you have nothing and you have to be so creative that you have to create something that it's going to bring a difference to the community that you live in, no matter what. So I think that for me, the friendship bench was a way of showing something that could be replicated. It's very easy and very affordable, and you don't really need even a bench. You just need to train people to talk to people and give them a safe space. That's all.
That's beautiful. I'm gonna now pass it over to Lisa, and she's going to ask some questions, and then we'll open up the floor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Noemi. So yeah, I just have a couple more questions. And like Lee said, we're going to open up the floor to everyone. So I know, Noemi, you're encouraging the hosting the screenings in the communities right now. So what conversations are emerging from those community screenings at the moment?
With connecting the dots, you know, films of this nature need a conversation afterwards, and connecting the dots more than probably a lot of the other films. But you can only bring change into a community if you have a good conversation afterwards. So the encouragement and the invitation to everyone is really to host a screening, or to bring, or to tell a friend that is involved with youth, or involved in mental health, or involved with anyone in the arena or the métier of mental health, and start a conversation, and bring the film. The film is really just a tool. It's the beginning of that inspires the conversation, and it could be targeted to anyone that is featured in the film, from parents to teachers to school counselors to young professionals, and also to professionals in the field who need to adjust to the new norms of this young generation, who sometimes are not treated in the way that they are looking for, and that's why there's so much uncertainty. So the invitation is to host a screening, hold a conversation, have a panel discussion, bring always kids to the table. Don't do any conversation when they are not part of the conversation. We don't talk about them without them. And at the same time, create either a panel discussion or a workshop or whatever suits your community. But that's the invitation to everybody.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll send those details tomorrow to everyone as well, if you are interested in hosting a screening. And my last question for you, Noemi, is given the body of work you've done over the years, what strategies do you think would be impactful to weave into today's current mental health issues? And are there any elements or ideas that you can pull from all like the learnings of your films and what you've experienced through doing all your films?
I think, Lisa, that if I was to summarize it in one sentence, is let's talk about it. Let's open up the conversation. Let's not forget about the real things in life. Let's actually be mindful about that. Let's unite in that sense of bringing people together, because together we are stronger, yes, but we also can bring change, and we can do a lot that otherwise we could not do. And I think that community feeling is very important right now under a pandemic. I think we start with the first nucleus of society, which is the family. And if the family is united, we bring it forward. We have to start with the young ones, give them a good base so they can grow properly and they can grow healthy and wise and not come into these problems. But if they do come, at least the parents need to know how to handle it. And nobody's exempt right now. I think that there's no one that I have talked to, young or old, that has not been talking about anxiety. So I think that we've all been experiencing what these young people have been experiencing for a long time. And I think it's time for all of us as a society to listen to young people and to try to support them and give them love, which is what they are looking for. And I think all of us are longing for love. All of us are longing for that hug that we cannot have. and just being together. That's what I think it's coming to the roots.
Amazing. There's a beautiful segue into let's talking about it now. We're going to open up the floor. So given our exploration this evening, we'd love for you to participate in a discussion for the next 10 minutes or so. So for the audience, what ideas or thoughts do you have that can forward youth mental health? Or if you have any questions for Noemi, you can put your hand up at this time. So please raise your hand virtually or if you're on camera, and then I'll call your name and you can unmute yourself. Okay, I see Blair. Hi, Blair. You're muted, Blair. You're still muted, Blair. I don't know if you can hear us.
Hi, Noemi.
Hello, Blair.
You probably had to answer this question a million times, but I've never heard the answer. I'd love to know your advice to anyone considering making such a radical career change as you made, someone wishing to get into documentary filmmaking. What would your advice be? Maybe just a few points.
Well, I am mentoring right now. I'm mentoring a young filmmaker. I don't know if he's in the room, Dante. It's not an easy job to get into documentaries. If you're looking to make money, don't get into documentaries. If you want to bring change into the world and tell stories, yes. But documentaries are more accepted now than they have ever been before. So there is a public that did not exist when I started. And you don't really have to do social issues films. You can do art films, you can do happy documentaries, and make a difference. My advice is don't be a director and a producer. It's too hard. Be an editor, be a cameraman, have a trade that they will pay you for the day, and you don't have to worry about looking for funding, and you don't have to worry about how you're going to tell the story. You will tell the story, but provided that there's a good director beside you, you will work together with that person, and it will become a great team.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, Hillary.
Hi. Noemi, what a wonderful body of work. And I've been in the change business for 40 years myself in all kinds of different capacities. And I have to say, it's just wonderful to see your creative, amazing way of turning over the rocks to be able to see what's underneath and to take away the veils to also see what's behind them. And it takes a great storyteller to be able to do that. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm just going to let you know how I'm going to use your film because I'm a mother of a beautiful young man who has struggled with mental health concerns and illness for many years. And I have been witness to a system that is fundamentally broken. I have been witness to a society that does not know how to cope or even understand how individuals with mental illness live. And so we turned a blind eye because we just don't know. I don't think it's because we don't care. I think it's because we just don't know how to address it. And so I think your film is a really wonderful awakening to, first of all, the fact we do need to look at prevention. I am also a grandmother, and I have two amazingly gorgeous grandchildren who I think are the most precious things in the world. And luckily they live in Sweden right now and have a very interesting lifestyle coming from Miami. But I'm going to use your film to help raise awareness so we can't keep driving these kids who are opening up, who are saying they need help into a broken system. We have they deserve more than that. They deserve different types of services, a way of not seeing themselves as broken with mental health, but seeing themselves as pioneers, adventurers, change agents, that whose depression and whose own anxiety is the indicator of someone who's a butterfly in the making. And we need to hear them, but we also need them to help us understand what are the fundamental changes we need to make. I'm a great believer in the fact we're dealing with intergenerational trauma, and that we have generation after generation of stories that have been inherited that are now showcasing themselves in another generation. So we can't just use talk therapy and pharmaceuticals to be able to deal with that. We need a fundamentally different approach. So I am very blessed to have seen your movie. I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to be able to use your movie, to be able to say, now look at this generation. They deserve not to be driven to 6-month waits to see a psychiatrist who doesn't even listen to them, to be put on medication because that's what the first thing is that's done. My son deserves better than that, and so do these kids. So
thank you so much. Thank you for all these wonderful words, and we'll continue the conversation.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Hi, Judith.
Hi. Noemi, I am just so overwhelmed listening to you describing every single film. I've not actually heard you before describe every single film. And, you know, you and I have become very close in the last year, having lost a mutual person in this year. And I am just overwhelmed at the excavating you've been doing, the amount of truth that you've uncovered, and the bravery you've shown. I'm really, really overwhelmed right now. I'm so happy that I came and listened to this and watched this conversation today. And also, you're such a pioneer, and I've always respected women who are pioneers, but say more in different ways, in art, in music, in writing. But this is like, you're a real changer. You're just really something. And when I first saw Milk, I remember being so, I left the premiere that night. God, I couldn't believe what you'd done. So just to hear you talk about the other films has been incredible for me. And it just means a great deal for me in my own attempts to move forward and bring my own truth to people. So thank you so much for this evening, and to you two ladies, thank you. I don't often enjoy Zoom getting together things, not my thing, but it was great. It was beautiful. It was elegant. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. And just a very quick note to the audience. Judith is very dear to me. And this past year, when doing the film Connecting the Dots, there were a lot of losses in my life. One of them was my dear cousin Pablo, which was like my brother, and Pablo was the consultant, the travel consultant of all my films. So when I'm telling all the stories about all the difficult places that I have gone through, Pablo was an amazing ally to be able to put those maps together and make sure that we would get every place on time and safe. And he always made sure that I was going to be safe and that I was going to be sleeping in a clean place. And it was an amazing part of the production that I could not have done it without him. So when people ask me what's my next film, I said it has to be local. I'm not traveling anywhere alone unless I take an Uber. So thank you for joining, Judith.
No, my pleasure. Yeah.
Great. Noemi, given we want to be mindful that, you know, we normally finish at 8:45, but we've got people with questions. So we want to honor, if you need to leave, we respect that. Thank you for coming, and we will continue for another 15 minutes if you have questions, because we really would like to hear what people have to say relative to what we've spoken about this evening. So thank you if anyone needs to leave. And then Lisa, why don't we just continue with people that have their hands up?
Sure. Thank you again, Judith, for such a beautiful story you just shared there. Jane, I know you've had your hand up for a while, so hi, Jane. You're muted as well.
Hi, Noemi.
Oh my God. Yes, she's an old friend that I haven't seen in a long time. Since I launched Desert Riders at the Vancouver International Film Festival. And Jane was with me holding my hand. And it's my first friend in Toronto, by the way. And I did not expect to see you here. So lovely to have you join us.
So excited to see you in some way or form. And following what Judith said and how you responded, that the next film you want to do that you can get to by Uber, I suggest we do a film about friends over the decades, and I will collaborate with you.
Okay. All right. See you, Jen.
Yes, and I just love having spent this time and listening to you. It brings me back to the 70s, and nothing has changed.
Well, a little bit. We are aging gracefully.
Whatever. I'll let someone take over and I'll listen. Love you.
But we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
For sure. Bye.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks, Jane. Hi, Dante.
Hi. Hi, Noemi. Pretty quick question. So you mentioned some advice about not being a producer or director, and you do a great job not following your own advice. But that's a great thing because you've had such a long career with so many great films. And my question is, what keeps you making films? And was there any particular moments in your life that you realized this is why I keep doing this?
I think I'm driven by the fact that films can make a difference. And I think that the power of media is so important. And if you have the right message, because you have to use media in the right way. You can use media in very many ways. But if you use it for the right purpose, there's nothing better. And that's what keeps me going. So, once you have the taste of what you can achieve, it's something that you can get out of it. From a financial point of view, that's when I was suggesting that anyone coming into the world, it's much easier to have one of the trades because you don't have to go through all the hurdles of making these films, which, as you know, is hard. And Dante is someone that I started mentoring. He's a young filmmaker from New York, so I'm very pleased to have him here. But no, you can continue what you're doing, but I'm not want to discourage. I joked about it, but really from the financial end, doesn't mean that you're not going to make a hit and make a lot of money. You never know. But there's not that many Michael Moores in the world. So unless you have an incredible big marketing budget behind you, that's all it is. Then you will bring more people in. But the truth is that right now under COVID, it's not going into theaters around the world, but we have the digital platforms, and that could bring big audiences. And I think it's a lot of, to make documentaries, you have to have a lot of responsibility towards the topic that you choose to do, as well as a lot of commitment to the participants, because they are sharing their lives with you. And that responsibility and commitment is a big one, that once you're in it, you have to continue. The results are wonderful. And like I said earlier, is the enrichment of the spirit really that keeps you going.
Awesome, thank you.
So don't give up.
I won't. You as well.
Amazing. Any final questions? Please feel free. By the way, Noemi, you've had so many lovely comments in the chat box.
Oh, I have it closed because I don't I get distracted, but I hope that you keep them so we can answer any questions if we are not there. But I don't see anyone ready to leave. So if there's any question and anyone that I'll be happy to answer.
Susan's got one, I believe. Hi, Susan.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
I have a question for you, and I'm just wondering, when you were very young, say 5 years old, like what did you ever dream of being when you were all grown up?
An architect.
Right, Jane is answering for me. I was going to be an architect. Yes, I went to study architecture in Argentina. No, I never imagined that I was going to be doing films.
Okay. And then even as you became like an adolescent and in your, what was that really that just that, you went into say marketing or advertising, and is that the field that you wanted to go into? And then you switched over? Or, I always believe everything in our life happens with a purpose. And we're really, led minute by minute, and everything in our life comes together at different points to, bring all our tools together. So your whole life brought you to where you are right now. And I'm just wondering, in your younger years, did you ever have an inkling, like when you look at your first jobs, and how that just rolled over and took you into this new adventure, how that played out for you?
But I was telling a dear friend who's here, Claudia, the other day, that I remember that in grade 4, I did win an award because of a composition that I had written. And it was a memory that I had very hidden, but I must have been 8 years old. So I think that I did have something in me that was a storyteller. I don't know. I love stories. I was going to be an architect. I stumbled into the rest of things that happened in my life. For whatever reason, life took me into a different journey. But my first job in Toronto was at the family court. I was a Spanish interpreter there. And that was a very important job that played a very big part in me that I never realized until I did Let's Talk About It. When I did Let's Talk About It about domestic violence, I realized that what I had witnessed and I had seen and interpreted in first person when I was really just 20 years old, and it was so difficult. It was one of the most difficult jobs that I had, because emotionally you had to become that person when you're interpreting in first person. And it was at the family court was most of my work. And when I did Let's Talk About It, I realized that there was a lot that I had learned, and there was something hidden. So you uncover things within yourself that I think that, Lee was asking me earlier, about the purpose and what is the purpose, but I really believe that we all have a purpose. It's just uncovering that purpose. Sometimes you uncover that purpose on your own, and sometimes life brings you into it, and you never know. But when you dig in, you realize that there's a certain connection that brings it all together. And I think that that's where I am today. But I've been in the communications business my whole life, in different forms. That's all.
Yeah. And I think being in communication in those different forms is what makes you so beautiful at what you do.
Thank
you. You can take all that background experience that you had at the time, which, you weren't even thinking about, but, it just really spoke to you on the inside. And then as you began to do your work, it shows that just resonates with you in your film. And I think that's what makes you very powerful and makes people very drawn to your work. They see that and they feel that.
Well, it's truthful and it's honest, and it comes from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Noemi, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. This has been such an honor to spend this evening with you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for the work that you do. Feel incredibly blessed. And we're just going to do our closing intention that closes the space, and then do our quick final announcements. Thank you for those of you that stayed longer to hear the last number of questions. So if we want to close our eyes for our final intentions. As we close our time together, with gratitude to all, we pause to offer each other love and kindness. May our understanding of love be expanded by what we have shared as we open ourselves to growth. May we rest in trust and surrender ourselves and our paths to divine grace, asking that this time together be protected, corrected, and held high. May we now see through love's eyes and understand beyond words. May we all be safe, happy, and healthy. May we all rest in full joy and know there is no distance between friends in time or space. Divine strength and peace surround us until we meet again. Open your eyes, and now over to Lisa for final announcements. Lisa?
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Before we go, I just want to thank you both for holding this space for all of us this evening and for allowing me to share so many stories. I hope that I didn't speak too much, because sometimes I talk too much.
No.
But thank you for all of that, and thank you for all of you who join us, and I hope that we can continue the conversation. I want to invite everybody to continue the conversation and reach out, and let's not just leave it here. This is just the beginning.
Absolutely. And are there any screenings that people can join, any community conversations that people can join that you know about at the moment?
I think the best is to follow our social media platforms, and also the website of connectingthedotsfilm.com. We are constantly announcing new screenings, and if there's anyone in the area, or, well, it doesn't have to be in the area, anyone that you're interested, everything is virtual right now. So that's the good of adversity right now. Yes.
Absolutely. And we'll share all of that with everyone in a follow-up email. So we'll pass it over. Thank you again, Noemi, and I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Noemi. It's so inspiring to see you bring so much light and hope to all these humanitarian issues, and specifically women and children. We know that's been your passion. And how exciting is it that as we've connected the dots of your work, there's solutions embedded within them. And we all have so many unique talents and gifts, and that we can use, like you are doing, Noemi, to make a difference in our families, communities, and in the world. So again, thank you. And like Lee mentioned in our highlights email, we'll be sending all the details of how to host a screening or purchase Noemi's films on DVD, or you have a few online that you can purchase as well. So just keep an eye out in your email for that. And our next LeeLa event will be on Wednesday, March 24th with the lovely Sue Nash, who's here tonight. So really excited for that. She's the owner of Body Innovations, where she teaches mindful movement classes and works with clients privately to overcome obstacles in their health. Sue will talk about the cumulative effect of stress on our body and how to use physical techniques, the breath, mindfulness, and our inner compassion to calm the nervous system and improve well-being. So until next time, everyone, be well, aloha, and good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.